On a cold winter night in a small town in Maine, a skinny golden retriever appeared outside a little diner. With eyes full of quiet hope, he seemed to be asking for a chance at life. What happened next didn't just change his life. It brought an entire community together. This is the story of Buddy, the abandoned dog who became a symbol of hope and love. Let's explore this heartwarming journey together. The winter wind howled outside Maple Diner, sweeping across the quiet streets of Bangor, Maine. Inside the warm, homey diner, the faint sound of clinking dishes and a jukebox playing soft music were the only interruptions to the calm. It was nearing the end of the evening shift, and the staff was busy wrapping up after another long day. Eamon, a young server with sandy brown hair and an easy smile, carried a bag of trash to the back door. Bracing himself against the biting cold, he stepped outside into the dimly lit alley. Snow crunched under his boots as he made his way toward the dumpster, his breath visible in the icy air. That's when he saw it. Sitting near the dumpster, partially shrouded by shadows, was a golden retriever. The dog's coat, though golden, was dull and matted with dirt, and its ribs were faintly visible beneath its fur. It didn't bark or move, simply sitting there with its head slightly lowered, but what caught Eamon's attention most were its eyes, deep, soulful, and brimming with a quiet, unspoken hope. "Hey, Buddy," Eamon said softly, his voice carrying a mix of concern and curiosity. He crouched a few feet away, trying not to startle the dog. "What are you doing out here in this cold?" The dog didn't move but tilted its head slightly, its tail twitching faintly against the snow. Eamon's heart tightened. He could tell this dog wasn't just any stray. It had a presence about it, a quiet dignity that seemed to ask not for pity, but for understanding. "Leo," Eamon called toward the open back door of the diner, "you've got to come see this." From inside, Leander, the head chef, appeared, his burly frame filling the doorway. His dark hair was streaked with grey, and a familiar smudge of flour clung to his apron. He stepped into the alley, grumbling, "What is it now, Eamon? Can't it wait?" "Not this time," Eamon said, motioning toward the dog. Leander followed his gaze, and his expression softened the moment he saw the golden retriever. "Well, would you look at that?" he muttered, stepping closer. "Poor guy, looks like he's been through the ringer." Without another word, Leander turned and disappeared into the kitchen. Moments later, he returned with a bowl of roasted chicken and rice. He crouched down and placed the bowl a few feet from the dog, careful not to startle it. "There you go, Buddy. You look like you could use this more than we do." The dog's tail wagged faintly as it eyed the bowl, but it didn't lunge for the food like most strays might. Instead, it approached cautiously, its movements slow and deliberate, as if ensuring the offering was genuine. Then, with surprising restraint, it began to eat, pausing between bites, as though savouring each morsel. Eamon and Leander watched in silence, the snow falling softly around them. "He's got better manners than some of our regulars," Eamon joked, breaking the quiet. Leander chuckled, his usual gruff exterior melting. "You're not wrong," he said, folding his arms across his chest. "He's got class, that's for sure." When the dog finished eating, it did something neither of them expected. It carefully picked up the empty bowl in its mouth, carried it back to Leander's feet, and sat down, gazing up at him with quiet gratitude. "Well, aren't you full of surprises?" Leander murmured, crouching to pat the dog's head. "What should we call him?" Eamon asked, his voice tinged with excitement. Leander thought for a moment before replying, "Buddy, simple, friendly, and it fits him." "Buddy," Eamon repeated, smiling as he knelt to ruffle the dog's ears. "Yeah, it's perfect." As they stood there in the snowy alley, the newly named Buddy wagged his tail slightly, his golden eyes reflecting the faint glow of the diner's kitchen light. Though the night was cold, the warmth of this small, unexpected encounter seemed to chase away the chill. Buddy wasn't just a stray. There was something special about him, something that neither Eamon nor Leander could quite put into words. but they both felt it, and in that moment they knew they couldn't simply let him go. Buddy had found his way to Maple Diner, and perhaps he had found the place where he truly belonged. The snow had begun to fall heavier over Bangor, Maine, blanketing the streets in a pristine white cover. Inside Maple Diner, Buddy had become a familiar sight, curling up by the back door or wagging his tail softly whenever Eamon or Leander came near. The dog had a calming presence, almost as if he belonged there, but his eyes always carried a flicker of something, urgency perhaps, or an unspoken plea. One evening, after the usual scraps of roasted chicken and a warm pat on the head, Buddy didn't settle by the back door as he usually did. Instead he stood, his golden fur glistening under the soft glow of the kitchen light, and stared at Eamon and Leander intently. His tail wagged once before he took a step toward the alley, then paused and turned his head back, as if to beckon them. Eamon frowned, wiping his hands on his apron. "What's up with him?" Leander folded his arms, studying Buddy. "He wants us to follow him," he said, his voice low but certain. "Follow a dog? Into the freezing cold?" Eamon asked, half joking. Buddy, as if understanding, gave another sharp wag of his tail before taking a few more steps, stopping at the edge of the alley. He turned back again, his golden eyes locking onto theirs with quiet insistence. Eamon glanced at Leander, who sighed and grabbed his coat. "Fine, but if we end up trudging through snow all night, you owe me a coffee." The two men followed Buddy through the quiet streets of Bangor. The snow crunched beneath their boots as they passed dimly lit storefronts and shuttered windows. The cold bit at their cheeks, but they trudged on, guided by the dog's purposeful steps. "He seems to know where he's going," Eamon muttered, tightening his scarf. Leander, walking slightly ahead, nodded. "That's what worries me. Whatever's at the end of this, it's important." The streetlights grew sparser as they moved further from the town's centre, the snow thickening underfoot. Finally, Buddy led them down a narrow, unlit side street that ended in front of an old, dilapidated shed. The wooden planks were warped and weathered, and snow had piled high against its sagging walls. From beneath the shed, faint, high-pitched whimpers carried through the cold air. Eamon froze. "Did you hear that?" Leander nodded grimly, pulling out his phone to use as a flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, landing on the base of the shed. The whimpers grew louder as they approached, and Eamon knelt down, peering through a gap in the rotting wood. "What do you see?" Leander asked, his breath visible in the freezing air. "There's something under here," Eamon said, his voice tight. "Two somethings, actually." Leander crouched beside him, angling the flashlight. Two small, trembling figures came into view, golden retriever puppies, no more than a few weeks old. Their golden fur was matted with dirt, and their tiny bodies shivered against the icy ground. "Oh, man," Leander muttered, his voice softening. "They're in bad shape." Buddy crouched near the opening of the shed, his body tense but still. It was clear he had led them here for a reason. Eamon reached out carefully, his hands trembling not from the cold, but from the sight of the frail puppies. "Easy now," he murmured, inching his hand through the gap. The puppies whimpered but didn't resist as he scooped them up, one in each arm. Their tiny bodies were cold to the touch, and they nestled into his jacket, seeking warmth. Leander shone the flashlight closer, his brow furrowed. "They've been out here for a while. Probably wouldn't have lasted much longer." Eamon looked down at the puppies, his voice breaking slightly. "We've got to get them back to the diner. Warm them up, get them some food." Buddy stood, his tail wagging gently, as if in approval. Without hesitation, the two men turned and hurried back through the snow, Buddy leading the way. Back at Maple Diner, Leander quickly cleared a small corner in the kitchen, laying down clean towels, as Eamon brought the puppies inside. The warmth of the diner hit them immediately, and their shivering began to subside. "Let's get some milk warmed up," Leander said, already moving toward the stove. "They're too small for anything solid." Eamon nodded, gently wiping the dirt off the puppy's fur with a damp cloth. "They're beautiful," he said softly, marveling at their tiny faces. "What do you think, Buddy?" he asked, glancing at the golden retriever who sat close by, his eyes fixed on the puppies. Buddy wagged his tail as if in agreement, his presence calm and reassuring. After a while, the puppies started to stir, their tiny bodies gaining warmth and energy. They nuzzled against Eamon's hand, their faint whimpers turning into contented sighs. Leander brought over a small dish of warm milk, and the puppies eagerly drank, their little tails wagging for the first time. "They need names," Eamon said, smiling down at them. Leander crossed his arms, nodding thoughtfully. "How about Max for this little guy?" He gestured to the slightly larger puppy, who had a curious glint in his eyes. Eamon grinned. "Max it is, and for this one." He pointed to the smaller puppy, who had a softer, more timid demeanor. "Daisy," Leander said without hesitation. "She's delicate like a flower." Eamon laughed softly. "Max and Daisy. Welcome to the family, little ones." That night, Buddy curled up near the corner of the kitchen, his watchful eyes never leaving Max and Daisy. The two puppies, now full and warm, slept soundly on their towels, their tiny breaths rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Eamon and Leander sat nearby, sipping on mugs of coffee. "He led us right to them," Eamon said, glancing at Buddy. "It's like he knew they needed help." Leander nodded. "He's not just any dog. There's something special about him." As the snow fell softly outside, Maple Diner had become more than just a small-town eatery. It had become a sanctuary. For Buddy, Max, Daisy, and the men who had found them, it was the start of something extraordinary. The snowstorm had quieted by the time Eamon, Leander, and Buddy returned to the dilapidated shed. The puppies, Max and Daisy, were safe and warm back at Maple Diner, but something lingered in Eamon's mind. "We need to check the shed again," he said firmly. "What if there are more?" Leander sighed, pulling his coat tighter against the biting cold. "All right, but let's make it quick. It's freezing out here." Buddy, as if understanding, led the way back to the shed. His movements were slower this time, his golden fur catching the faint moonlight. The shed loomed ahead, its warped planks barely holding together under the weight of the snow. A faint creak echoed as Eamon pushed open the rickety door. Inside, the air was musty and stale. The flashlight beam revealed piles of old tools, broken furniture, and tattered blankets scattered across the floor. Eamon and Leander began carefully scanning the space, looking for any signs of life. "Do you think their mother might have been here?" Eamon asked, his voice echoing softly. Leander nodded grimly. "Possibly, but Buddy bringing the pups here, it's like he knew this was a safe spot." As Eamon knelt to inspect a corner, a voice, hoarse and trembling, broke the silence. "Who's there?" Both men froze, their flashlights snapping toward the source of the voice. Emerging slowly from behind a stack of wooden crates was an elderly man, his frail frame wrapped in layers of mismatched clothes. His face, lined with deep wrinkles, spoke of years of hardship. He leaned heavily on a cane, his hands trembling slightly. "I don't want trouble," the man said, his voice weak but steady. "But if you're here for the pups, please don't hurt them." Eamon and Leander exchanged a glance before Eamon stepped forward, his tone calm. "We're not here to hurt anyone. The puppies, Max and Daisy, they're safe. We brought them back to the diner to warm up." The old man's posture softened at Eamon's words. He let out a shaky breath, his grip on the cane loosening. "They're safe?" Leander nodded. "We'll take care of them, but how did they end up here?" The man hesitated, his gaze dropping to the ground. "Their mother. She didn't make it," he said quietly. "I found her not far from here. Hit by a car, I think. Buddy brought the pups to the shed. He wouldn't leave them, not until he knew they'd be all right." Eamon looked at Buddy, who was sitting silently by the old man's side, his golden eyes reflecting the flashlight beam. "So Buddy saved them," Eamon said softly. "He's the reason they're alive." The old man nodded. "He's smarter than most people I've met." Eamon stepped closer, his voice gentle. "What's your name, sir?" The man hesitated before replying. Alaric used to run the hardware store a few blocks over. That was a long time ago. Leander frowned. I thought I recognized you. Alaric's Hardware, right? I used to stop by when I first moved here. Alaric gave a faint, wistful smile. That's me. But times changed. The store closed and... well, here I am. Eamon scanned the shed, noting the tattered blanket spread across a pile of old crates. It was clear Alaric had been living there for some time. You've been staying here? He asked, his tone tinged with disbelief. Alaric nodded. It's not much, but it's shelter. And when Buddy showed up with those pups, it gave me something to hold on to. Eamon crouched beside Buddy, stroking his golden fur. Why didn't you come to town for help? Alaric's eyes clouded with a mix of pride and regret. I didn't want to be a burden. People have their own problems. Besides, he gestured to the shed, I figured no one had much use for an old man like me. Leander's jaw tightened. Everyone has worth, Alaric. You shouldn't have to live like this. For a moment, the only sound was the faint whistle of wind through the cracks in the shed. Buddy nudged Alaric's leg gently, as if reassuring him. The small gesture brought a flicker of warmth to the old man's eyes. Eamon stood, determination shining in his expression. Come back to the diner with us. It's warm and we have food. You can rest there. Alaric hesitated, his pride battling with the undeniable need for help. I don't want charity, he said softly. It's not charity, Leander interjected. You've already done enough by keeping those pups safe. Let us do something for you in return. Alaric looked down at Buddy, who wagged his tail as if encouraging him. After a long moment, Alaric gave a small nod. All right, just for a little while. With Buddy leading the way, the three men made their way back to Maple Diner. Inside, the warmth of the diner enveloped them, and Alaric visibly relaxed, his shoulders loosening. Eamon quickly prepared a bowl of soup and set it in front of him, while Leander brought out fresh blankets. As Alaric sipped the hot soup, his eyes drifted towards the corner where Max and Daisy were snuggled together fast asleep. A faint smile tugged at his lips. They're going to be all right, he said, more to himself than anyone else. They are, Eamon agreed, sitting across from him, and so are you. For the first time in years, Alaric felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind him that he wasn't alone, not anymore. Buddy had saved the puppies, but in his own quiet way, he had also saved Alaric. That night, the diner was more than a place for meals. It was a haven, where broken souls and wandering hearts found their way back to warmth, kindness, and the possibility of new beginnings. The gentle chime of the diner's front doorbells blended with the warm hum of conversation inside Maple Diner. Snow still covered the streets of Bangor, Maine, but inside the diner, the air was cozy, filled with the aroma of coffee and fresh-baked pie. In a quiet corner of the kitchen, Max and Daisy snuggled on a bed of soft towels, their golden fur now clean and fluffy. The two puppies, once frail and trembling, were growing stronger each day. Their playful barks and wagging tails brought new energy to the place. Nearby, Buddy lay stretched out on the floor, his watchful eyes never straying far from the puppies. His calm presence seemed to reassure them as they nuzzled into one another, occasionally glancing at their loyal guardian. True to his reputation, Dr. Amias, the town's veterinarian, had arrived promptly the morning after Buddy brought Max and Daisy to the diner. A man in his early 40s with dark, neatly combed hair and a warm smile, Amias had an air of calm confidence. These two are fighters, he said, examining Max and Daisy with practiced hands. They're underweight, but nothing a little love and good food won't fix. Eamon and Leander exchanged relieved smiles. What about vaccinations? Anything we should worry about? Eamon asked. I'll take care of it, Amias replied, his tone reassuring. They'll need regular checkups, but they're on the road to recovery. You're doing a good thing here, taking them in. Leander, who rarely let emotion show, gave a small nod. We're just doing what anyone should. Ammius glanced at Alaric, who was sitting nearby, quietly observing the scene. The older man looked out of place in the bustling kitchen, but his eyes softened as he watched the puppies. "You've got a good team here," Ammius said, addressing Alaric. The older man shifted in his seat, giving a faint smile. "They've been good to me." Buddy had settled into his role as the puppy's protector. Whether Max and Daisy were playfully tugging at each other's tails or napping in a sunlit corner of the diner, Buddy was always nearby. "He's like their big brother," Eamon said one evening, watching as Buddy gently nudged a rolling ball back to Max. "Or their dad," Leander added with a smirk. "He's got the patience of a saint." Customers noticed Buddy's quiet devotion, and many left scraps of food or small toys for the puppies. The sight of the three dogs together, with Buddy's calm demeanor and the puppies' playful antics, brought smiles to everyone's faces. As the days turned into weeks, Alaric began finding his own role at Maple Diner. Initially hesitant to accept more than a warm meal, he soon started offering to help with small tasks. At first, it was simple things, peeling potatoes, wiping down counters, organizing supplies. But as his confidence grew, so did his contributions. "You don't have to do all this, you know," Eamon said one morning as Alaric carefully stacked freshly washed dishes. "I know," Alaric replied, his voice steady, "but it feels good to be useful." Leander noticed the change in Alaric. The man who had been hesitant to even accept a bowl of soup was now laughing with customers and joking with the staff. It was as if the warmth of the diner had begun melting the layers of loneliness and pride that had kept Alaric isolated for so long. "He's got a knack for this," Leander remarked to Eamon one afternoon. "The guy could teach us a thing or two about running a business." Eamon grinned. "Maybe we should put him on payroll." Leander smirked. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." Max and Daisy continued to thrive, their playful energy bringing life to the diner. Regulars adored the puppies, often pausing to pet them or offer treats. One customer even donated a small hand-sewn blanket for their bedding. Buddy, ever the watchful guardian, kept a close eye on the pups, stepping in with a quiet nudge or a bark whenever they wandered too far. It was clear he saw them as his responsibility, a role he had taken on with unwavering devotion. Alaric, too, became part of the family. Though his past was marked with hardship, the present offered him a chance to rebuild. At the diner, he found not just work, but connection, a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in years. One snowy evening, as the staff cleaned up after the dinner rush, Eamon glanced at Alaric, who was humming softly as he stacked plates. Buddy lay nearby, his head resting on his paws, while Max and Daisy played tug-of-war with a dish towel. "This feels right," Eamon said quietly to Leander, who was wiping down the counter. Leander followed Eamon's gaze and nodded. "It does. Feels like home." Maple Diner had always been a cozy little eatery, but now it felt like something more. It was a haven, a place where broken souls, both human and canine, could find safety, warmth, and love. Alaric had gone from a lonely man living in a cold shed to a valued member of the diner's family. Buddy, Max, and Daisy were no longer strays, but cherished companions who brought joy to everyone they met. As the snow fell gently outside, the diner glowed warmly, its light spilling onto the street like a beacon. Inside, laughter and the sound of playful barks filled the air. For Alaric, Buddy, Max, and Daisy, this was more than a second chance. It was a new beginning. Together, they had found not just survival, but a family. And in the warmth of the diner, they discovered something even more precious: hope. The winter in Bangor, Maine showed no signs of relenting. The snow continued to pile up outside Maple Diner, while inside, the warmth of the small-town eatery buzzed with life and laughter. Alaric, now a regular fixture at the diner, had found purpose in his new role. However, the realities of his living situation weighed on both Leander and Eamon. One evening after the dinner rush, Leander pulled Alaric aside. "Alaric, we need to talk," he said, his voice firm but kind. Alaric raised an eyebrow. What's on your mind? Leander glanced at Eamon, who stood nearby, nodding in agreement. It's about the shed, Leander continued. It's not safe. The roof could cave in with all that snow, and the wiring looks like it hasn't been touched in decades. You can't keep living there. Alaric hesitated, his pride immediately surfacing. I've managed this long. It's not ideal, but it's enough. It's not enough, Eamon interjected gently. You've done so much for us already, helping out here, taking care of the pups. Let us help you in return. Leander added, We've got an empty apartment upstairs. It's warm, close to the diner, and a lot safer than that shed. Alaric's expression softened, but he still shook his head. You've already done more for me than I deserve. It's not about deserving, Leander said, his tone serious. It's about making sure you're safe. That's all. Buddy, who had been lying nearby, seemed to sense the weight of the conversation. He padded over to Alaric and rested his head on the old man's lap, his golden eyes filled with quiet understanding. Alaric stroked Buddy's head, his resolve wavering. Finally he sighed. All right, but only if it doesn't trouble anyone. Leander clapped a hand on his shoulder. You're family now, Alaric. It's no trouble at all. Word of the plan spread quickly through the small community. Regulars at the diner and neighbours pitched in to help renovate the apartment above Maple Diner. Supplies were donated, a fresh coat of paint, furniture, warm blankets, and even a handmade dog bed for Buddy, Max, and Daisy. Eamon and Leander led the efforts, with Buddy ever curious, following them as they worked. The golden retriever occasionally carried small items up the stairs in his mouth, wagging his tail proudly after each delivery. Max and Daisy, meanwhile, turned the renovation process into a game, chasing after paint rollers and playing tug-of-war with rags. The sense of community was palpable. Everyone wanted to contribute, moved by Alaric's story and the bond he shared with Buddy and the puppies. By the end of the week, the transformation was complete. The once empty apartment was now a warm, inviting space. Soft rugs covered the floors, curtains framed the windows, and a small table in the corner was adorned with fresh flowers from a neighbour's garden. A second-hand armchair, donated by a local shop, sat near the window, a perfect spot for Alaric to sit and watch the world go by. On move-in day, the staff and friends of Maple Diner gathered to help Alaric settle in. Leander carried boxes up the stairs, while Eamon set up a small shelf in the kitchen, arranging cans of soup and jars of coffee. Buddy inspected every corner of the apartment, his tail wagging as if giving his approval. Max and Daisy darted from room to room, their playful energy filling the space with life. As Alaric stood in the middle of his new home, his weathered hands resting on Buddy's head, he felt a lump rise in his throat. I don't know how to thank you all, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You don't have to, Eamon replied. Just enjoy it. You deserve this. That evening, a celebratory dinner was held at the diner in honour of Alaric and his new beginning. Customers, staff and friends filled the cosy space, sharing stories and laughter. Plates of warm food were passed around, and the puppies scampered between tables, delighting everyone with their antics. Leander raised a toast. To Alaric, Buddy, Max, and Daisy. Proof that no matter how tough life gets, there's always room for a fresh start and a family to lean on. The room erupted in cheers, and Alaric, sitting at the head of the table, couldn't help but smile. For the first time in years, he felt truly at home. Over the following weeks, Alaric settled into his new life above the diner. The apartment became a sanctuary, not just for him, but for Buddy, Max, and Daisy as well. The puppies loved napping in the sunlight streaming through the window, while Buddy enjoyed lying by the armchair, keeping a watchful eye on his family. Alaric found joy in the simple things, brewing a fresh pot of coffee in the morning, listening to the faint hum of the diner below, and watching the snow fall outside his window. Every day, he felt a little lighter, a little more whole. One evening, as Alaric sat in his armchair, Buddy curled at his feet and the puppies playing nearby, He reflected on how much had changed. Just weeks ago, he had been living in a cold, dilapidated shed, unsure of what the future held. Now, he was surrounded by warmth, love, and a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in years. Eamon knocked on the doorframe, a cup of tea in hand. "How's it going up here?" "Better than I could have imagined," Alaric replied, his voice soft. Eamon smiled. "We're glad you're here. The diner wouldn't be the same without you, and neither would we." As Eamon left, Alaric looked down at Buddy, who blinked up at him with those wise, golden eyes. "You brought me here, didn't you?" he said quietly. "Not just the pups, but me too." Buddy wagged his tail softly, his gaze steady and knowing. For Alaric, it was as if Buddy was saying, "This is where you were always meant to be." The lights of Maple Diner glowed warmly below, and for the first time in years, Alaric felt not just safe, but at peace. This was more than just a home, it was a new beginning. The night air was sharp and cold, the snow crunching underfoot, as Buddy made his usual patrol near Maple Diner. The warm glow of the diner's lights illuminated the street, but beyond the small oasis of warmth, the world felt eerily quiet. Inside the diner, Eamon and Leander were finishing the cleanup for the evening, unaware of the scene unfolding nearby. Buddy's ears perked suddenly, catching a faint, distressed sound, a high-pitched whimper, followed by the muffled shouts of children. He froze, his golden eyes scanning the dimly lit alley near the diner. The sound came again, louder this time, a mix of desperation and fear. Without hesitation, Buddy sprang into action, his paws kicking up soft snow as he darted toward the commotion. In the shadowed alley, a group of older boys stood in a semicircle, jeering and laughing. At the center of their cruel game was Ben, a small boy no older than 10, crouched protectively over a trembling puppy. The little dog, its fur a mix of white and brown, whimpered as the boys hurled insults and occasionally kicked snow toward it. "Leave him alone!" Ben shouted, his voice trembling but defiant, his arms wrapped tightly around the puppy, shielding it from the cold and the boys' taunts. One of the older boys sneered. "What are you going to do about it?" Before Ben could answer, a low, menacing growl cut through the air. The group turned, startled, to see Buddy emerging from the shadows, his golden coat glinting under the faint light of a street lamp. His posture was calm but commanding, his head held high, ears alert, and eyes blazing with purpose. The boys hesitated, their bravado faltering under Buddy's intense gaze. When Buddy took a deliberate step forward, baring his teeth slightly, the group scattered, their taunts silenced as they disappeared into the night. Ben remained crouched on the ground, his arms still around the trembling puppy. Tears streamed down his face as he looked up at Buddy, his fear replaced with awe and gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice cracking. Buddy wagged his tail softly, stepping closer to the boy. He sniffed at the puppy, his golden eyes assessing the little dog's condition. The puppy was small and frail, its fur dirty and matted. One of its legs hung awkwardly, clearly injured. Eamon and Leander arrived moments later, having heard the commotion from the diner. "Buddy!" Eamon called, his voice both concerned and relieved. When he saw the boy and the injured puppy, his expression shifted to one of understanding. "What happened here?" Leander asked, kneeling beside Ben. Ben wiped his eyes with the back of his sleeve. "Some kids. They were picking on him. I couldn't just leave him." Eamon crouched beside them, his voice gentle. "You did the right thing, Ben. What's your name?" "Ben," the boy replied shakily. "This is Lucky," he added, nodding toward the puppy. "All right, Ben," Leander said, his tone firm but kind. "Let's get you both inside. It's too cold out here." Back at Maple Diner, Eamon and Leander worked quickly to warm Ben and Lucky. They wrapped the boy in a blanket and handed him a steaming cup of hot chocolate, while Lucky was placed on a soft towel near the kitchen's heater. Buddy lay beside the puppy, his presence calm and reassuring. "Let me take a look," Eamon said, carefully examining Lucky's injured leg. The puppy flinched but didn't resist, as if sensing the kindness in Eamon's touch. "His legs hurt. but it doesn't look broken, Eamon concluded. We'll need to call Dr. Amias in the morning. Ben watched anxiously, his hands gripping the mug of hot chocolate. Will he be okay? Leander placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. He's tougher than he looks, and with you looking out for him, he's got a good chance. Ben's eyes welled up again, but this time with relief. Thank you, he murmured. As the night wore on, Ben began to open up. He explained how he had found Lucky wandering the streets a few days earlier. The puppy had been limping, but Ben couldn't bring himself to leave him behind. I've been trying to take care of him, Ben said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I didn't know where to go. My parents, they're not around. Eamon and Leander exchanged a glance, their expressions heavy with concern. It was clear that Ben had been struggling alone, much like the little dog he had rescued. You're not alone anymore, Eamon said gently. You and Lucky can stay here for now and we'll figure something out. Ben looked up, his eyes wide with gratitude. Really? Really, Leander confirmed, his tone resolute. This place has room for everyone who needs it. Buddy remained by Lucky's side throughout the night, occasionally nudging the puppy with his nose as if to encourage him to stay strong. Max and Daisy, sensing the new arrival, approached cautiously, their curious tails wagging. Soon, the three dogs were curled up together, their collective warmth creating a small haven of comfort. Eamon sat with Ben at one of the diner's booths, talking softly about school, his favorite foods, and the adventures of Buddy, Max, and Daisy. The boy began to smile more, the weight of his worries easing with each passing moment. Leander, watching from the kitchen, felt a rare swell of pride. Maple Diner had always been a place for good food and company, but it had grown into something far greater, a sanctuary. The first rays of dawn broke through the diner's windows, casting a golden glow over the scene. Ben and Lucky were fast asleep in the corner, Buddy lying protectively nearby. Max and Daisy, ever playful, nudged Buddy's tail, their little barks filling the air with light-hearted energy. Eamon sipped a cup of coffee, his eyes lingering on the peaceful scene. He's just a kid, he said quietly to Leander. He shouldn't have to go through all this alone. Leander nodded. He won't have to anymore. As the day began, the diner came alive with the sounds of a new morning, clinking dishes, the hiss of the coffee machine, and the laughter of its newest family members. For Ben and Lucky, the cold streets were a distant memory, replaced by the warmth of a place where they truly belonged. Buddy, lying near the window, watched as the snow continued to fall outside. His golden eyes reflected the soft light, as if he knew his job wasn't done yet. There were still more lives to save, more hearts to mend, and he was ready. As winter slowly began to loosen its grip on Bangor, the snow-covered streets of the small town became less foreboding. Inside Maple Diner, the warmth was more than just physical. It was emotional, a shared spirit of kindness and connection that had blossomed in recent months. The story of Buddy, Max, Daisy, and Alaric spread quickly. Regular customers shared it with friends, and soon the diner became more than just a place for good food. It became a symbol of hope and generosity. One crisp morning, Eamon walked into the kitchen to find Alaric hunched over a mixing bowl, a look of deep concentration on his face. The older man was meticulously measuring ingredients, while Buddy watched attentively from the corner. "What are you up to?" Eamon asked, raising an eyebrow. Alaric glanced up, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I thought it was time I taught you something useful. This," he gestured to the bowl, "is my wife's cornbread recipe. She used to make it for every holiday and people would line up for a slice." Eamon's eyes widened. "You never mentioned you could bake." "Didn't seem relevant until now," Alaric replied, his tone light but tinged with nostalgia. "I think she'd like the idea of her recipe living on here." Eamon nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "Let's do it." Over the next few hours, the kitchen filled with the comforting aroma of freshly baked cornbread. Alaric showed Eamon each step with care, his hands steady and precise despite their age. When the first batch was pulled from the oven, golden and fragrant, even Leander couldn't hide his approval. "This is going on the menu," Leander declared, taking a bite. "It's too good to keep to ourselves." While the cornbread became an instant hit, it was the dogs who truly stole the hearts of Maple Diner's patrons. Buddy, with his calm demeanor and golden coat, was the unofficial greeter, often lying by the door to welcome guests with a wag of his tail. Max and Daisy, now healthy and full of energy, brought endless joy with their playful antics. Customers delighted in watching them chase each other around the diner or nap together in a sunny corner. Even Lucky, the little pup saved by Ben, became a familiar sight, his leg fully healed thanks to Dr. Amias's care. Children begged their parents to visit the diner just to see the dogs, and adults left with lighter hearts, their days brightened by the furry companions. As Maple Diner's story spread, so did the impact of its message. Customers began leaving donations to help animals in need, inspired by Buddy's journey and the kindness of the diner's staff. With the help of Dr. Amias, the diner started a small fund called the Buddy Initiative, aimed at supporting pet owners who were struggling to care for their animals. One afternoon, a man named Carl, tears streaming down his face, thanked Alaric and the team for helping him keep his aging dog. "I was going to have to give her up," Carl said, his voice shaking. "But because of you, I can keep her at home where she belongs." Alaric, usually reserved, placed a hand on Carl's shoulder. "No one should have to choose between their pet and their next meal," he said quietly. "We're glad we could help." The diner itself began to evolve. The once quiet eatery became a bustling hub of activity, filled with laughter, the clinking of dishes, and the occasional bark from one of the dogs. Local musicians started playing on weekends, and the walls were adorned with photos of Buddy, Max, Daisy, and Lucky, along with heartfelt letters from those who had been touched by their story. For Alaric, the diner was more than just a place to work. It was home. He thrived in his role, not only as a baker but as a storyteller, sharing memories of his wife and their life together. Customers often lingered just to chat with him, finding solace in his quiet wisdom. One snowy evening, as the last of the customers left, Eamon and Leander stood by the window, watching the snowflakes dance in the glow of the streetlights. The diner was quiet, save for the soft snores of the dogs curled up by the fireplace. "Hard to believe how much has changed," Eamon said, his voice filled with awe. "Buddy showing up here, it changed everything." Leander nodded. "It's not just the diner, it's the whole town. People see what kindness can do, and they want to be part of it." As they spoke, Alaric emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "That's the thing about kindness," he said. "It's contagious." Before heading upstairs to his cozy apartment, Alaric paused by the fireplace, looking down at Buddy. The golden retriever blinked up at him, his tail wagging softly. "You're the reason I'm here," Alaric said, his voice low but filled with gratitude. "You brought me to them, to this." Buddy wagged his tail again, his golden eyes calm and knowing. Alaric smiled, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. As the lights of Maple Diner glowed warmly against the winter night, it was clear that this little eatery had become more than just a place for meals. It was a beacon of hope, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward, changing lives in ways no one could have imagined. And at the heart of it all were Buddy, Max, Daisy, Lucky, and Alaric, a family brought together by chance but bound forever by love.